Hi, I'm Mike McLean. Welcome to the Short Circuit podcast brought to you by Swift Aircraft. In this series, we'll be chatting with a variety of people from all walks of life, but who all have one thing in common: aviation. We'll discuss how and why they got into aviation, what or who inspired them, and what they would say to encourage young people to get involved. Flight fascinates many of us, and our guests will explain why they are compelled to look to the sky. Today's chat is with Dr Geoff Coxon. Geoff is a scientist and an avid aviation enthusiast. He's heavily involved in STEM and raising awareness of aviation as an industry in Scotland, particularly in and around the Prestwick Aviation Hub. For those not familiar with the area, I think you might be surprised at how much is going on there and how it dovetails with STEM outreach. But before we kick off, I have a request. Please remember to click the like button, share with friends and colleagues, and subscribe. This really does help us get the word out. So, with that in mind, here goes. Okay, so good afternoon, Geoff Coxon, Dr. Geoff Coxon, I should say. And welcome, welcome to the Short Circuit. So what we're going to do, we'll get straight into it with question number one, and that is, who are you and what is your current role in aviation?
Oh, excuse me. I start off with a big cough. So as you said, Mike, so my name's Geoff Coxon, and I'm the founder and chief executive officer, the fancy name, for a charity called theSkylab. And we're based in Kilmarnock, which is about 20 miles southwest of Glasgow.
Right. Okay, so southwest of Glasgow. But okay, we'll get the obvious one out of the way. This is not a Kilmarnock accent that I'm hearing. So
no, it is not a Kilmarnock accent. It is a Geordie accent. Just in case people are getting it confused with the city a little bit further south than Newcastle.
Right. Okay.
It is definitely a Newcastle accent.
Okay, right. We'll leave that there, but at least we know now. Okay, so thanks a lot for coming along this afternoon, Geoff. I know you're extremely busy, and it's been a long time trying to get juggling calendars to get this done. So we'll get straight into the meat then. So question number two, and that is, what was the incident or aircraft that first inspired you to get into aviation? You know, how old were you, where and when, that sort of thing. So what got you started?
So I reckon, Mike, that I was probably about 2 or 3 years old. I got some very vague memories of me in a pushchair watching my Uncle David take off somewhere in Newcastle, obviously not in the city centre, but probably some big open field somewhere, but around about Newcastle in a Bell 47.
Wow.
Yeah, and I can remember it. I have this memory, and it's just a very vague thing. Unfortunately, my Uncle David is still around, and he concurs that it did happen.
Right. Okay. Well, if you've got verification, that's good. But a Bell 47.
It is, but then, Mike, that then moved on to probably when I was about 5 or 6, and I can remember this much clearer. I was very fortunate that another uncle, my Uncle Graham, he had a pilot's license, and he flew little Cessnas and glider tugs and things like that. And I remember being on his car. Oh, actually, it could have been my Uncle David, but certainly watching aircraft coming in and out of Woolsington Airport, which is now Newcastle International Airport.
Oh, right. Okay. So it's been in the family for a while since you were around. There's been uncles chucking themselves up into the sky, and you got caught up with that.
I did, but I never actually started flying for a long time after that. So it was in the blood, but from a viewing perspective.
Was it something that you wanted to do when you were a child? Did you get into the cadets or anything like that?
I did, Mike. I ended up going into. I was actually quite late in the day going into Air Cadet, so I didn't probably fully get the benefit of it. I was in 242 Squadron, Cramlington, which in Cramlington's an old mining town about 11 miles north of Newcastle. Famous for having the high school where Sting penned half of the Police songs. So,
There you go. Don't start singing,
um,
please.
yeah, so don't worry, I won't do that. You don't want to hear that, Mike. Honest. So yes, I was only in there for a few months because I was very late in the day into that
Mhm.
for reasons being just purely daft. But yeah, it was great. So their cadets is a phenomenal thing to get into, and the earlier the better.
Mhm.
It's an amazing organisation.
I would concur with that. I introduce you as doctor. Let's cover the education bit then. So, doctor of what? And
So this might surprise listeners. I was going to say viewers, Mike, but listeners, in that I've actually got a PhD in nothing to do with aeronautical engineering whatsoever. I'm actually a medicinal chemist, so I invent medicines. Although now I'm actually inventing mRNA vaccines, and so I'm developing all the chemistry as part of a very, very big UK funded project to, in effect, develop this proprietary chemistry and understand how all the chemistry works in all of the mRNA vaccines. So, for those of you that don't know what an mRNA vaccine is, you might know it more as the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccines during COVID, the COVID
all right,
pandemic.
okay.
So
Fine.
that's what I do now post COVID.
Right.
So that's what the PhD's in. Um, but I got there, Mike, and forgive me if I'm moving on a little bit
No,
here,
no, no, keep
but
going.
the link, the reason I ended up becoming a scientist wasn't because I had any desires to be a scientist. I ended up getting a degree in chemistry because I really enjoyed chemistry.
Mhm.
But I went to university to do a degree in chemistry purely so I could be a pilot in the RAF. And I
Right.
went in via the University of Wales Air Squadron because I did my degree in a place called Bangor in North Wales. So I used to fly in and out of RAF Valley and RAF St Athan, at
Mhm.
the MOD St Athan, flying little bulldogs, Scottish Aviation Bulldogs. And there's a link with that later on. Okay,
Right. Okay.
so yeah, so that's how I ended up getting my PhD.
Right.
So
So this
obviously I
was
wasn't very good at flying, clearly.
so you joined the university with a focus to get access to the University Air Squadron.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right. Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, RS and Athens. I always wanted to fly. Uh, having obviously what we said earlier. But Mike, it didn't work out. I was chopped quite quickly and severely from the flying program in 1993. Because Mike, I never had any confidence. I had absolutely zero confidence, and that was the problem. So
Right. Okay.
yeah, it
Okay.
was, I
So
mean, I ride motorbikes and things like that, and now, but at the time, I just hadn't learned to drive a car. The first bit of moving machinery I ever got into was a Scottish Aviation Bulldog, and that was uh, so. And I
that's
had no
maybe
confidence.
taking, well, I don't know, some people adapt to that, but
It
that's a
do.
bit of a
Oh, yeah,
challenge. That is a
yeah,
bit of
yeah,
a
you're
challenge.
right. But it was confidence, Mike. I think ultimately, and I ended up just being just scared of the aeroplane and not very confident in my own ability. And those
Hmm.
two things don't mix very well when you're trying to move on quickly on the flying program with the RAF.
Yeah, I think the RAF's route is quite intense, whereas if you're doing it yourself through a local flying club, you can go at your
Mhm.
own pace,
Very
sort of
different.
thing. So the other subjects that you did at school, were you naturally what's the word I'm looking for, attracted to the technical side of things, the STEM side of the
Gosh,
subject, or were you more arts and literature?
so that's actually a really interesting question because it's one of those things that, with hindsight and with age and maturity, you reflect on and you think, why did I actually pursue the sciences? Because I did chemistry, physics, maths, with English, did history. What else did I do? Gosh, I can't remember now, but I certainly was really into the physics and the chemistry side of things, not so much the mathematics, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I don't know if I was naturally gifted to that, which might sound really strange. Thing, oh, hang on, here's a guy who's inventing mRNA vaccines and's got a PhD and does all sorts of stuff with chemistry, teaching pharmacists in the west of Scotland. But now, Mike, I actually think that what drew me to science and what really gets me going is the creativity side of it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because because a lot of people have arts and science as very binary things. You're either artistic or you're scientific, but there's a big overlap
Hmm.
with science and engineering, Mike. And people talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths, and then some people talk about STEM M, with the M being medicine, and some people talk about STEAM, with the A being arts.
Hmm.
And there's quite a lot of debate over it. And I see the art part of STEAM as being really, really important, but it's not from the drawing pictures or the artistic side of it. It's the creativity side of it. It's the
Hmm.
creative side of it. So I mentioned that invent medicines and COVID vaccines. The creativity bit of it is what you do with the science, and that's where the invention comes. That's where the creating new things comes. And so I think that when you think about STEM, I think STEM automatically is a silent A,
Hmm. Okay. Yeah,
because
I mean,
you have to have that creativity part of it.
I'm glad you brought it up because the overarching reason for doing these podcasts is to put it out there that STEM doesn't just mean spanners and aviation doesn't just mean
Absolutely.
pilots. There's a whole panoply of activities and careers that are available for young people coming through. And I mean, STEM itself is a great thing, but I think it can maybe scare some people off because they are more on the creative and the artistic side. They don't see themselves as those four letters. They see themselves as the A. And then they may assume, well, what's artistic in the aviation sector? What's artistic in the aviation industry? And from doing these chats, I'm learning that there is so much scope for the creative side and the literature side, and even if it's down to designing paint schemes for airlines. I mean, that's a job.
Yeah.
That's a career. Is doing all of that, and it's definitely aviation based. It's definitely an artistic thing. So it's instantly matched. So, but you're getting into, so you're doing a lot of medical and chemical stuff. Is there any crossover between that and your aviation thing, or is the aviation
Yes.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, Mike,
tell me
there
how
is.
that works because I'm
Yeah,
curious about that.
it is. So fundamentally, the reason that we started Skylab was nothing to do with that almost abstract concept that I've discussed about, where the crossover between art and science comes over. It was just purely because around about 2010 I started to get a yearning again to fly, and I remember there was a little syndicate at Newcastle Airport that had a little jet Provost T Mark 3A.
Hmm.
And it wasn't it was surprising it was called the Newcastle Jet Provost Group. Being in
Okay.
Newcastle Airport with a jet Provost. So so I joined that syndicate, and that syndicate was really good because it had the ability, in fact, it still exists. It's based at Teesside now, I believe. Um, the options to be either a pilot member or a social member, and because I've never got my PPL, I ended up becoming a social member. I started going around the UK display circuit with this in this little jet Provost. And at the time in the day job, Mike, I was doing lots of science outreach. And back in the day when STEM, those abbreviations, acronyms, STEM, it didn't exist. It was called Public Engagement in Science and Engineering. So STEM's obviously a much more attractive way of discussing it. But I was doing a lot of medical outreach with the Glasgow Science Centre, with the National Museum of Scotland, promoting a project funded by the then Scottish Executive, now called the Scottish Government, about how medicine drugs work.
Hmm.
And it all came about because a detective sergeant in the CID once asked me a question: how does aspirin know where to go?
Right. Good
And
question, actually.
they put away this really big, hardened, nasty criminal in Glasgow, and they were celebrating, and obviously the headache followed the morning after. I'm explaining to this detective. I said, "Oh, it's because like a lock and key, it finds the lock and then it opens it because of the shape it's got." And I thought, "Oh, that was quite interesting." So we developed some stuff in the day job, doing
Hmm.
a lot of public outreach with the Glasgow Science Centre and the National Museum of Scotland. And when I joined the syndicate, those of you that know about the museums in Scotland know that the National Museum of Scotland has a museum called the National Museum of Flight,
Hmm.
which has a Concorde. And I pitched this idea and I said, what if we do the sort of outreach we did with the medicine drugs, but we do it based on flight, and I'll put together some workshops based on the Scottish curriculum. And then at the end of it, we'll bring the jet provost across from Newcastle Airport and we'll conceptualize what we did in the workshops with the jet. And it went down well, and we tried 3 times to get the weather right in Newcastle. At the same time, it wasn't over East Fortune, and whilst the jet being serviceable, and we did it, and it worked really well. So we got some funding from the Royal Academy of Engineering, one of their ingenious grads, which was about 85% jet fuel.
Right.
And then this really rubbish thing happened, Mike, which was the syndicate ended up losing the jet,
Oh.
which then transpired into us going to the Typhoon display team at Coningsby, because subsequent to that, I joined 5 guys with a mad idea to resurrect the old Prestwick Air Show to become what then became the Scottish International Ayr Show, doing all the only but just doing the STEM aspect of it. So we combined the two, and we ended up doing the first science lesson with a jet fighter. And actually, it's 10 years this September, Mike, when we did a science lesson with the jet provost. And that's how this all came together. So we started doing lots of outreach with air shows then, with this similar sort of concept of conceptualizing air displays and jets to the fundamentals of the sort of physics of flight and what's involved in flight. Yeah. So, and that's how it all sort of started off, Mike.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing how all these things sort of they all form one big jigsaw as you're moving through your career. Doing the outreach and working with young people and so on, how effective do you think it is? I mean, it's not for everybody, obviously, but you maybe touch the lives of a few hundred kids over the course of these activities. Do you ever get the opportunity to get feedback or updates and see how young people have progressed through, and if they've got into aviation and stuff, that sort of thing?
Yeah, the short answer is you get feedback. And one of the hardest things to do with STEM, with outreach like this, is to monitor it all the way through for feedback. It is exceptionally difficult, because if you're tracking a primary school child, pupils, let's say a girl who is maybe 9 or 10. So you're talking, what's that? So sort of key stage. What's that? Key stage 2 down in England, Wales, but P7, P6, P7 thereabouts in Scotland. And then you want to see whether they go into apprenticeships, whether they go off a degree, you're looking at between an 8 and 10 year period, and practically that is impossible to do. It just is. So the feedback that you tend to get normally is feedback normally after an event itself. And you can see and people ask me, how do you get feedback? If people like get feedback at all, because feedback is very, very difficult to get. There's a whole lot of ways you can do it. You can do the wonderful ubiquitous survey, 1 to 10, enter comments in a bit of paper, which just turn people off. Or you can do things like you're doing now, podcasts or videos. But I think one of the biggest telltale impact observations is to observe, look, watch, and talk to people. And that's very much where we get to see where the touch points or the pinch points or the feedback is. And you can tell immediately with how you affect somebody by that. And I can remember them vividly. Some of the projects we did under Concorde, I can see a couple of young people, mainly girls actually, Mike, jumping up in the air because they've got an airplane to take off. We used these little rubber band airplanes. I think you probably remember them, because we took them to some of the schools when we did some stuff back in the day. And you just see the delight. And then you see the other end of it, kids who are just not engaged, don't want to do it, are just mucking about. They're mainly boys at that age, right? But so you see it, and you get the feedback from the teachers as well. So you're having some sort of impact. And if we look at some of the feedback recently up what we're doing with the Prestwick Aerospace Hub, we've learned by that, and we're getting so the questions that we ask, how we ask them, when we ask them, are tailored and designed so that we do know that we're getting shifts in just understanding that Prestwick Airport has a massive aerospace hub. They know it exists, which is good. They know how to get a career if they choose to, what steps to take to think about doing that, how it influences their subject choices or not. So yeah, there's a whole range of which you can do. But I've never yet had anyone come up to me and say, "Oh, hi, Geoff, 10 years ago I did this thing, and because of that, I'm doing this career now." And I think you have to be realistic in what your outcomes are. I'm not saying that's never going to happen, but I've never had that. But what I have had, Mike, are some teachers saying, "Oh, I remember you did this. Oh, yeah, that really affected our kids. It was great. They've changed subject choices." So a lot of it's anecdotal. Or I might have a degree student who said, "Oh, I came to volunteer with you once at some of your stuff, and it was brilliant because I could put it on my application to Rolls-Royce. When I got to an interview at Rolls-Royce, it was great. I could talk about that. They loved it. I got a job."
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not just necessarily the target young person. If you've got people helping you, it's just all the network. It's the web that spreads out, and it's there. As you say, collecting the data is very, very difficult.
It is, Mike. And just last Thursday, so that'll be the 22nd of February for those that are tuning in later. We had a big promotional event for the one and only project that Skylab does now, which is, and we can talk about it if we have time later, which is being the strategic partner of the South Ayrshire Council, putting together, overseeing the entire strategy for the new International Ayr Show Festival of Flight. And I had to do a speech with our flying display director, Les Garside-Beatty, the head person of the council who was involved in this, and also the chief executive of the RF Benevolent Fund, because they're the Ayr Show's charity partner. And I had to put together some words to be introduced. And I put together some words, and I thought, well, gosh, how many people have we actually engaged in whatever format, whether it be really deep pedagogical learning, deep learning, or whether it be people who've listened to one of our science lessons over the PR system of an air show, whether it be at RIAT or Farnborough or wherever. And we sort of penned them down with one of our trustees, who's fantastic, a guy called Ken Mollison, who's a really well-known STEM ambassador up here in Scotland. And we reckon that we were not exaggerating by saying about 1 million people over 12 years. And so we are talking sort of 4, 5, 6,000 in terms of the schools outreach, the sort of the curriculum link, deep learning, all the way to the impact at RIAT or Farnborough with sort of workshops and display stands and interacting with people, to a 240,000 crowd at last year's inaugural International Ayr Show Festival of Flight. So there's a lot of ways that you can do it, and there's quite a large outreach, Mike. But so there are different ways to do it. There is no one size fits all.
Right. Okay. So the next formal question I've got on the list here is really, what are the developments and innovations that you see coming over the horizon? Now, for those who are in the manufacturing side of the industry, the answers have been different materials or different electronics and stuff. But from your position, so what do you see new that's coming over soon in outreach and engagement as a STEM ambassador? And is there any crossover between that side of your life and the professional side and in the medical sciences?
Yeah, there is. Oh gosh, that's a really good question. It's almost, if I asked you, Mike, can you ask me this question? That'd be very close to what I'd actually ask you to ask me. So the big focus for us is Prestwick, the aerospace hub at Prestwick, and the air show that we're strategic partner for, which is the International Ayr Show Festival of Flight. Part of the reason that air show came about was to showcase what, quite frankly, is a phenomenal resource that they have at Prestwick Airport. About 85% of the Scottish aerospace industry is based at Prestwick, and it is phenomenal. And I'm starting to learn what they have there, the companies, going around chatting to them, getting to know them properly, because we've known them for about 12 years, but not in the way that we have, because we have the contract with South Ayrshire Council. And some of the manufacturing that they're doing there in terms of new engines for GE, aircraft wing subassemblies with Spirit Aerospace, Collins Aerospace with the work that they do with sort of their protective enclosures for engines, how they work with partners there, their composites that they work there. We look at companies like Ryanair, who obviously repair, maintain all of the Ryanair fleet at Prestwick Airport. You've got Chevron Storm that are MROs, which are maintenance, repair, and overhaul dismantle aircraft. And you look at the sort of the talent and the skills involved in there, and BAE Systems as well. Then I hope I'm not missing out any of the companies. Woodward with their fueling systems that link with GE. Prestwick has a nose to tail complementary aerospace hub,
Right.
and they need new people coming in at apprentice level, at highly skilled technical levels, and they need a supply chain of young people coming in. And not nobody, that's completely wrong. A very small amount of people know how amazing that is. So I'm getting to see the advances in what they do there. The advances, so for example, the wonderful composite turbine blades with GE, the composite centers that they have at Collins, the technical augmented and virtual reality that they have at various companies like Spirit and at Ayrshire College, and all of the tools, the high-tech tools, the traditional skill tools in mechanics and mechanical engineering. All of these combined, I think, for me, are just phenomenal. I see the diversity in skills across there: high tech, traditional engineering, coding. Oh gosh, it's right across the board. Watching all these companies work and getting to understand them, and the diversity in the jobs, the fantastic pay. Crikey, that some of these jobs have. I leave me gobsmacked. And also the closeness and the wonderful environments which you can work in. The closeness, how proud these companies are, is fantastic. And you mentioned about, is there an overlap in the day job? So I mentioned that I do the mRNA vaccines, and the chemistry in mRNA vaccines that I'm specializing in sort of leading my part of this research project, are things called lipids or fatty acids that encapsulate all of the mRNA, the nucleotides that eventually make the spike protein that trigger the immune system for the vaccines. But those lipids are not that different to the hydrocarbons that make aviation fuel.
Right. Okay.
And one of the things that we had to do with the Ayr Show, and that SkylAb had to put together, is something called Ayr Show Zero, looking at how we rationally look at the science and the technology that underpins being able to reduce the amount of carbon used in our air shows. Which isn't that different to how we try and look at reducing the carbon of the 2050 goals or the 2030 goals with Jet Zero. So there's an overlap there, how we look at the technologies that underpins reducing the carbon footprint, and it's real. It's real. So I'm actually going to overlap with trying to get partners together with what we're doing university, with the industry, looking at that. And there's an overlap with, so for example, there's a wonderful organisation and institute called ENMIS in Scotland, the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland, which have a lot of decarbonisation and looking at the offshore wind. And I'm trying to look at how that can overlap into the manufacturing space with decarbonisation fuels and, of course, sustainable aviation fuel. So all these things are coming together. And so the outreach, what we're doing with the industry, with the public, with the Ayr Show Zero, and the plans that we've got on that, because if we look at an Ayr Show, for example, anywhere between 5 to sort of 10% or thereabouts of the carbon footprint is with the aircraft. Right. The vast majority of it's like any festival, any event. It's on the ground. It's the traders. It's the public getting there, back, the transport there. It isn't just the air show. And air shows get a really bad reputation for being dirty, and they're actually not that much dirty than any big event. If you look at the footprint of Glastonbury, it's going to absolutely swamp the footprint.
You took the words out of my mouth. You took the words out of my mouth, Geoff. So, listen, the clock's against us. So you've gone. It's been excellent, but I've got to get the big question of the day in, and we've got a couple of minutes to do this. So, the big question of the day, Dr. Geoff Coxon, what is your favorite aeroplane and why?
Oh wow. Oh, that is an awful question.
Yeah, I know. I'm
That's
evil.
an awful question. There are so many. Oh goodness me. Well, the Scottish Aviation Bulldog is close to my heart because obviously I learned to fly in that, and there's a link with Prestwick Airport because Scottish Aviation.
Hmm.
But that's not necessarily a one that I would say that would. Oh, this is so difficult. This is so difficult.
I'll try and help you out here. So it's not one that you think is the best or the cleverest aircraft or all the rest of it. It's
I mean,
just
emotionally, the one that I immediately thought of.
it's your favorite. What if you had to have a picture of it stuck on your office wall? What's it
Yeah.
going to be? What makes you
Okay.
smile?
That's really easy, and it's going to be a Griffin-powered Spitfire, a Mark
Wow.
24.
Okay.
I absolutely adore. I absolutely adore the Griffin powered. So those that can't see, I'm holding up to Mike because we're actually on camera. A 1/32 scale model of a Mark 24 Spitfire. Yeah, that's for me. When I walk past an aeroplane, so for example, we were privileged to do a lot of consultancy with the Imperial War Museum at Duxford. So just before, just after lockdown, and when you walk around the collections there, the plane that I stop at for about 2 or 3 minutes and just lose myself in is a silver. I think it's a Mark 18 Spitfire they've got there with the
Mhm.
5 blades. And I just always stop at that plane and I come back and have a look at it.
Right.
Always.
Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So and if you've got a picture of a particular Spitfire that you want to add to our uh, virtual control tower wall, then
I
please
will
send
actually.
that to me.
I will.
Otherwise, I'm
And
going to have to
and
go and grab one.
it will be the Rolls Royce
Right.
Spitfire we had at our air show last year. That is for me the most beautiful aeroplane that is out there.
Okay. Well, send me your picture, and we shall get that put up on our wall. I can tell you that at the moment, that's the only the second Spitfire that's going to go on the wall,
Oh,
which
interesting.
actually surprised me. And we're already up to in the teens now. We're up to the teens of all the aircraft that have been selected. And I was expecting it to be half Spitfires, half Concords,
That is interesting. So
but only the second Spitfire. But very specific, late model, Griffin powered.
gotta be Griffin. Five blade prop. Everyone goes the Mark 9 was the most gorgeous. I completely disagree. It was the Griffin.
Geoff, that's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. Thank you for your time. And I will try and get down to the show this year. I didn't make it last year, but that's a long story, and I think we need to get a beer for me to explain that
We
one.
do, and you're always welcome. Always
Hey,
welcome to drop
excellent.
by.
So, Geoff, thanks for coming on the short circuit. I'm going to wrap it up there, and I will speak to you soon.
Pleasure. You take care, Mike.
So that was Dr. Geoff Coxon. Yet again, we find someone with so much passion and drive for the subject. It's obvious that Geoff truly believes in what he's doing and that developing youth interest in aviation is worth the time and the effort. Geoff's knowledge of the activity in the area and the ways he has generated links between the industry, education and the public are truly inspired. So, we say thanks to Geoff for his hashtag inspiring aviation amongst the youth of southwest Scotland and beyond. Here on the short circuit. Fly safe. You have been listening to The Short Circuit, presented by Mike McLean and sponsored by Swift Aircraft with the hashtag Inspiring Aviation. This has been a Zoom Spike production.